Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Benton County Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, April 16th. And we'll begin with introductions. I'm Zan Ogerow, Chair.
Pat Malone, Commissioner.
Nancy Wise, Vice Chair.
Vance Corning, County Council.
Rachel McEnany, County Administrator.
And in the room,
Steve Chase, retired, live in the unincorporated area of Benton County.
Joel Goodwin from House Police Department.
Crystal Patterson from House Department.
Debbie Sessions, interim CFO.
Stephanie Rath, District Attorney's Office.
And the entertainment.
And Nikki, CSC staff. Warren Kotowski, Board of Commissioners staff.
Rick Rager, Assistant County Administrator.
Corey Grogan, Benton County Public Information.
John Ware, PSC Office.
Eric Nichols, Community Development.
Erica Milo, Board Reporter. Second.
thank you, Erica. And online. Is there anyone online who wishes to introduce themselves?
I would, Debbie Palmer, Benton County resident, and I'm introducing myself because I would like to make public comment.
Thank you. Thank you for that heads up. Anyone else? Okay, with that, we will move on to reviewing and approving the agenda. There's one change I'd like to note, and that is during our executive session, we will be considering only labor negotiations under 192.6602D. The other item will be deferred for another meeting. Next, is there anything else that I should, any other alterations to the agenda? Okay, with that, we'll consider it approved. Moving on to our proclamations, we are going to begin this morning with a proclamation for Public Safety Telecommunications Week in Benton County and invite Captain Goodwin up to the table to present the proclamation.
Thank you for having me here today. The proclamation is in recognition of our dispatchers, our public safety telecommunications. It reads, dedicated telecommunication professionals in Benton County provide round-the-clock service to both community members and visitors, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. These telecommunicators promptly respond to 911 calls requiring assistance from law enforcement, fire, and emergency medical services, dispatching aid swiftly. Professional public safety telecommunicators exhibit unwavering dedication and commitment daily, serving as crucial intermediary between community members and public safety providers. They play an indispensable role in saving lives, safeguarding property, and apprehending criminals. Professional telecommunicators perform critical functions extending beyond emergency response, encompassing various operations conducted by federal, state, and local government agencies, including emergency management, highway safety, and search and rescue. Recognizing the importance of telecommunicators and their pivotal role in safeguarding life and property, the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials, APCO, and other organizations across the United States and Canada, including Benton County, have designated the second week of April as a time to honor and acknowledge their contributions. Therefore, let it be proclaimed that April 14th through 20th is hereby designated as Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in Benton County, urging all community members to participate in this observance.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Or motion?
Well, just a comment that I have used the 911 system as a volunteer firefighter and appreciate the tough job they do and let them know that they are appreciated.
Thank you.
Likewise, I have great appreciation for the service provided by the 911 Communications Center. And I know it's a difficult and stressful task where you can have long periods of no action and then everything is crazy. So you have to be able to handle that kind of up and down. How are you all doing in terms of having full cadre of employees?
We have been working very endlessly to make sure that we're doing our best to hire qualified candidates. I think it's somewhat of a reflection on the difficult nature of the job, that it's been a challenge to find the right people. And given the nature of the job, we're not willing to settle for anything other than best. So we continue to work on that, and are optimistic that we're going to someday be able to fill all those vacant positions.
I know, I'm sure you're not alone in terms of public safety access points, in terms of looking for the right people. So best of luck to you and to all of us here in Benton County that rely on services. Commissioner Wise, do you have a comment?
Just to thank everyone for their service and thank you for being choosy about who you hire. It's very important.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to proclaim April 14th to the 20th as Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in Benton County, Proclamation 2024-006.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate with an eye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time and effort, and thank you again to all of your staff.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to move on to Crime Victims' Rights Week in Benton County. We have with us Stephanie Rath from the Crime Victims Office in the District Attorney's Office. Welcome. You'll need to make sure that the button is pushed on the mic so that the red light shows.
Oh, got it. Good morning. Americans are the victims of 20 million crimes each year, affecting individuals and communities. And in 2023, in Benton County, the District Attorney's Office Victim Assistance Program assisted 2,401 crime victims, providing 42,670 services. Since 1981, the United States has observed National Crime Victims' Rights Week to raise awareness about victims' rights and services. The Office for Victims of Crime has declared the 2024 theme, How Would You Help? Options, Services, and Hope for Crime Survivors. Surviving a crime can have lasting effects on victims, including physical, psychological, social, and financial issues. We know that countless survivors never tell anyone about what happened to them. Each of us has a moral responsibility to actively participate in the healing of others. It is necessary to create safe environments for survivors of crime, providing not only support, but also access to critical services and, above all, hope. Victim services providers, community members, businesses, places of worship, colleagues, neighbors, and family members can provide victim-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive support. We must listen to survivors and be willing to create new options for support to ensure that all victims of crime can seek and receive justice. We must do everything we can to show survivors that hope, the belief the future will be better, is not just tangible, but within their reach. National Crime Victims' Rights Week encourages all people to ask themselves the question, how would you help a victim of crime? The Benton County District Attorney's Office is hereby dedicated to raising awareness of options, services, and hope for crime survivors. Therefore, be it proclaimed that April 21st through April 27th, 2024 is Crime Victims' Rights Week in Benton County, and reaffirming Benton County's commitment to creating a victim service and criminal justice response that assists all victims of crime during Crime Victims' Rights Week and throughout the year. Expressing our sincere gratitude and appreciation for those community members, victim service providers, and criminal justice professionals who are committed to improving our response to all victims of crime so they may find relevant assistance, support, justice, and peace. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
I'll move to proclaim April 21st through April 27th, 2024 as National Crime Victims' Rights Week in Benton County, proclamation 2024, phase 007.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And Stephanie, are there any events happening in Benton County that you would like to alert us to in association with Crime Victims' Rights Week?
Yeah, so outside the courthouse, we'll have a flag display for representation of victimization from last year. And then we also will be holding a ceremony on April 27th or 22nd, Monday at 3:00 at the district attorney's office.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, next on the agenda is comments from the public. And I know that we have online Debbie Palmer. Is there anyone in the room that has signed up for public comment? Don't believe so. Okay, Debbie, if you'd like to pop on camera.
Okay, can you see and hear me?
I can see and hear you. And we have the 3-minute timer going here, so.
Yep.
Floor is yours.
So first I'm working from scribbled notes. I don't have a script, so, and I'm nervous on camera, but first I want to commend you for starting to ask harder questions of Republic Services about the landfill. But I also want to encourage you to get answers in writing because I think they're a little squirrely. But I do appreciate that you are starting to question them more than you have in the past. Next, I want to, and I am looking at the minutes from this is the minutes from the February 6th Board of Commissioners meeting. Next, I want to speak to you a bit about the assumption that no CUP is needed to expand into cell 6 of the landfill. Council mentioned a 2002 Planning Department memo establishing that the activity in the current cell designation is allowed without further county activity, and that the legal subcommittee was unanimous on that. Well, the legal subcommittee was made up of primarily Republic Services attorneys, more than one, and Crony. So of course they're going to say that. The legal subcommittee says that cell 6 is part of the current active permit. However, the past land use subcommittee of the BCTT was unable to find that permit despite extensive hours of searching. Also, the past land use subcommittee was not in consensus that cell 6 could be moved into without a conditional use permit because this critical document is missing. So Commissioners Wise and Ojiro, I know that you always want to see hard data and reports. I would ask you to insist that council find and show you the actual CUP and supporting documentation for this current permit. So, you know, what are the conditions of approval? I would think you would want to know this before allowing any expansion into cell 6. Lastly, you know, as council said, the county is the ultimate arbiter, so you have some power there. And if I still have time, I would like to comment about another item in the minutes. This is the discussion with Republic Services regarding the 2022 EPA methane report. And so Ian McNabb had said that his excuse for the 2022 the EPA report higher emissions was that Republic Services had an ongoing gas construction project which temporarily contributed to higher gas levels. So that report was in June or July.
Excuse me, Debbie,
Yes.
you are at time now, but if you can just, if you want to wrap that thought up, that'd be fine.
It's just a couple of sentences. So the point I was going to make was that later that same year, that same engineering company contractor documented 101 exceedances, almost double the EPA report of just a few months before. And then a year later, in 2023, Carbon Mapper documented significant plumes of methane, which extended well beyond the boundary of the landfill. A plume more than twice the size of that emitted by the Columbia Ridge landfill, which is 3 times the size of Coffin Butte. And my question was that Ian McNabb only told you about the 2022 EPA report after you bugged them for it. But did they tell you about the September documentation of the 101 exceedances? So, sorry. Thank you for letting me speak poorly.
Thank you very much for bringing those elements to our attention, and we will continue to ask questions, pursue answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
With that, we are now going to turn to the consent calendar, which contains approval of those February 6th, 2024 board meeting minutes alluded to by Debbie Palmer.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to new business. First up, we have Tali Bukovic and Debbie Sessions with the County Assessment Function Funding Assistance Grant, otherwise known as CAFA, not to be confused with the Behavioral Health CAFA.
Correct. Yes. Ours has another A in there. Theirs is
Exactly.
just CFAA. Ours is CAFFA. No. Good morning, all. So each year you see us come to you for approval of our CAFA grant that goes to the Department of Revenue. And that is all included in your packet, the grant, all of the financial pieces that go along with it. This helps to fund the tax collection process, assessment, records with what used to be called BOPTA, but is not anymore, and the GIS function. This year's grant, our total expenses are about $3.9 million that we're putting forward. We expect to get about $419,000 to help cover that. That's about 9% of our costs. We have, when I say we, the assessors and tax collectors associations have been actively talking to the legislature through our lobbyist about how that percentage continues to diminish over time. And because the funding stays pretty steady, but the costs continue to go up. So our request is for a motion to approve the grant, and I will take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I guess a little more detail. So this program has been in place for quite a while.
Decades, yes.
And the formula, or you say here we have 4 million worth of expenses and we get less than 10%
So what
in the grant.
So the way they determine that is they take all of the grants that are submitted across the state, and then we get a pro rata share of their pot based on our pro rata share of expenses.
And the pot of money is stayed.
Yes, so it's been pretty consistent. I don't know the answer to how much the total pot is, but it has stayed consistent. And that's where the issue for all of us counties is that has stayed the same, yet expenditures have continued to grow over time.
Yeah, there's various programs and fees that if not tied to inflation after a decade get way out of whack. So I'm familiar with this. Okay, thank you.
Question. So there's a document or documents in here called the Biennium GL status detail.
Mhm.
Does that get sent to?
It does.
Okay, so I just noticed that it's the old county logo on there. So could we perhaps update that to the new county logo before we send it?
So probably not. These are reports that have been generated by IT. So I can talk to them about that.
Okay, not a
Sure.
huge deal. I just noticed, so.
Sure.
I think those might be embedded in Munis, aren't they?
The data is from Munis. IT created the reports through SSRS. So
Okay.
there's a chance that they can go switch that out.
Okay, sounds like IT needs to update their logo.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a persistent problem. And I know that we've been at the legislature through the Association of Oregon Counties and the Association of Tax Assessors every year. I hope that we can have some success because this is certainly not a functional way to cover the expenses. And yeah. Thank you. I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the 2024-2025 CAFA grant document certifications and resolution as presented and authorize the interim chief financial officer to digitally sign the online documents on behalf of the Board of Commissioners and submit to the Oregon Department of Revenue.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Next up, we have the formal adoption and dissemination of the Benton County 2024 Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan with Brian Lee. I see Chelsea is on the agenda, but not with you today.
That is correct. So good morning, Commissioners. Just a quick backstory on the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. This is a required plan by FEMA for us to receive and be eligible for grants. And actually with the recent ice storm or winter storm disaster declaration, it actually opens up a pot of money called the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And to be eligible for those grant funds, which are in the millions, we have to have an updated natural hazard mitigation plan. So this formal adoption of this plan actually opens the door for not only the county, but also any jurisdiction outlined in the plan. So all the incorporated cities, as well as some special districts, are all included and eligible for those grant funds. And so there's a bunch of projects listed in this plan that are used to, of course, we keep saying mitigate, but lessen the impact of hazards on our community and our infrastructure. And that is what the funds are going to open up and be available for, is to actually execute some of those projects. One thing to say on managing expectations there is sometimes these projects are between 3 to 6 years long. So it's a very long process to actually execute the project in its entirety. The only other comment I have on it is this is multi-jurisdictional. The last update was in 2016. It's supposed to be updated every 4 years, but the last one fell right on during COVID. So things kind of got pushed back significantly. And then we put in for grant funds to have this plan updated. They were with some of that COVID declaration, and those were delayed as well. And then lastly, this is not truly part of the CWPP. The CWPP, or Community Wildfire Protection Plan, is actually a supplemental document, supplemental plan that has a sort of separate pot of funding available, but they go hand in hand with this natural hazard mitigation plan. So in review of the plan, you'll notice that there's not a heavy wildfire component, and that's because there's an entirely separate plan managed through community development that covers it. And with that, I will read the resolution for the plan. All right. Under ORS 401, counties are required to have and administer an emergency management program. One of the cornerstones and key mission areas of each program is planning. The Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, or NHMP, is a required component of emergency management and local government programs receiving FEMA-related grants. The Benton County Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan outlines the natural hazards we face in Benton County, but also outlines prioritized mitigation strategies and projects that help lessen the impact of those hazards on our critical infrastructure and community. The plan was completed locally by a steering committee comprised of a variety of jurisdictions and backgrounds. Additionally, a hazard vulnerability analysis was completed and feedback was solicited from the community for input, including from disadvantaged and those who do not speak English as a first language. The Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan addresses the Benton County 2040 core value of community resilience to ensure that our communities and individuals are prepared to respond to and recover from natural threats and disasters. Additionally, the plan has specific areas focused on the mitigation of climate change impacts as required by FEMA and outlined in the FEMA strategic plan. With the formal promulgation of this plan, jurisdictions within Benton County become eligible for grant programs such as Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, or BRIC, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, Post-Disaster Hazard Mitigation Program, and others. With this resolution, the Benton County Board of Commissioners formally adopts and promulgates the Benton County Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan of 2024.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. First two are going to be very minor, but I went through the list of participants in the process. And one of the things that was interesting to me was that there's a section for Benton County employees, or people by agency, but then Gary Stockhoff and Patrick Deppa are both listed under other contributors and interested parties rather than as county employees. And I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, so formally, Gary was contacted as well as Patrick at the time to get some input, and they provided some oversight and input to DLCD directly, but they they assigned a designee essentially to fill in their behalf. So in Public Works' case, it was Laurel Byer.
Okay, it jumps out at me when I look through the list of participants that some Benton County participants are Benton County and others are just interested parties.
Yeah, I believe often it was they just received a few email exchanges and coordination
Okay.
for information, and then the actual steering committee members like Inga Williams and Toby Lewis were directly involved
Okay.
on it.
The other thing just to draw your attention to is that Corey Grogan's last name is misspelled. It has a J in it in this version. I do have one question that is more substantive, and it's on page 295, 2-95.
Do you know what page in the packet that is?
No.
See on your computer right there?
I'm looking, I did not have have it on that page. So I'm looking now and I'll tell you as soon as I can find it.
I have a question if you want me to.
Go ahead.
So I noticed on page 225 of the packet, there's a letter from FEMA to Stephen Richardson. And it says, there's a part in it says, based on FEMA's review, the plan did not include all dam risk. Thus, your jurisdiction is not eligible for assistance, blah, 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 blah. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I can. So it was Rock Creek Dam is considered a high risk dam. And we actually met with DLCD as well as it was Greg Gesher and a few other folks from the city of Corvallis to discuss the mitigation strategies. And they actually have since outlined and updated their mitigation strategies and projects listed there, and they sent those back up. We were informed by DLCD that we could still move forward with adoption, even with those changes not included in this draft version, and it will be immediately included right after. So this plan has to actually be reviewed at least twice a year. So as soon as it's adopted, we basically reopen it and add in those changes.
Okay,
through
perfect.
that process.
So it will be included in the HHPD grant program could be ineligible. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I believe Corvallis adopted the same plan last night, and that was a stipulation as well.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. That's a good catch. Thank you. Page 295 is page 176 of the packet. And it's about vulnerabilities of the built environment, critical facilities and infrastructure. And in terms of housing vulnerabilities, there's a statement that in Monroe, mobile homes accounted for 127.7% of the housing. And I'm thinking that's a typo, because how could you have 127% of the housing? So may just have an extra digit in there.
That's what it sounds like. I'll talk to DLCD as well, and we'll make sure that is also edited.
Minor. The dam issue is much more important. Commissioner Malone, do you have any questions?
Yeah, a couple. You said the last revision was 2016.
Yes, the last formal revision and adoption was in 2016.
And this is supposed to be done every 5 years?
Correct.
Okay. But no consequences to being delayed because of COVID?
Well, technically, no. So if you don't have an updated plan and you apply for mitigation grant funds, for example, the City of Adair recently did that. I believe it was a year and a half ago. They have to seek a formal letter, basically a waiver letter from the state. And the context is that we are working on a plan. We're working on the grant program to get the plan developed. And then that authorized essentially them to receive a waiver from the state. So that was the only actual consequence of not having the plan in place, is that we had to go through extra processes to ensure that we are working on the plan and demonstrate that as well and have some proof. And then they would issue a letter and we would all be eligible again.
A lot of really good information in here, other than the formal submission. How is this document put to use?
Yeah, so primarily actually as those projects, and now whenever there's a statewide and federally declared disaster, this pot of money opens up for all jurisdictions, whether or not they were directly impacted or not. In our case, of course, for the winter storm, we were. So we are now eligible to start executing some of those projects through this mitigation grant program. There's a 25% cost share and some other, of course, hooks and details related to the program itself. But that is the primary way that this plan is going to be used. And then the hazard vulnerability analysis is also a key piece of the puzzle. So we've, based on the way we put together the steering committee and the assessment we received from the community, we've put that together as our official hazard analysis for the community. And those are constantly changing and being updated, and it does not include man-made or human-caused disasters of any kind. So those are only natural disasters, but that allows us a ranking priority in an area to start focusing on for our planning and basically our area of concern based on community input. The last thing this plan does as a whole is acts as an overarching sort of guide of where we'd like to go, particularly related to the climate change impacts. Some of these mitigation strategies, require a lot of money. Some of them are more focused on systemic changes and dialogue that can be developed. And in fact, thinking about some of our sustainability cruise efforts and the recent EPA grant, it kind of opens the door for us to hang our hat and say, we've done these analysis, we've had the discussions, and these are some of our strategies we'd like to implement moving forward. And it allows us to sync up a lot of our plans as well. So as we go through other plan updates related to our climate adaptation or sustainable materials, we can start including all of this into the hazard mitigation plan as well. So it really opens up that door for a lot of other opportunities to sync things up.
Okay, part of my thought was areas like community development or climate goals, and just I hope this isn't a document on the shelf or in the computer that it seems like there's a lot of useful information in there.
Right. And historically, I'll say almost all the documents traditionally ended up, as we would say, on the shelf art, which is, moving forward. And as we've seen from all the disasters, really kind of an inappropriate approach to planning. And really, it's about the planning process and developing the relationships. The details are also very important as well. But we really want to leverage those relationships we built in the planning process and keep these grant opportunities in mind and keep these discussions and dialogues open. The last area that this plan is used is with the community rating system, of which Benton County and City of Corvallis are actually some of the few in the state that participate in it. And it allows homeowners to receive a discounted rate on flood insurance through the FEMA flood mitigation program that's managed through community development.
Thank you.
You pointed out the nexus with the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. I am particularly happy to see the fact that the all hazard emergency evacuation route prioritization is embedded in this document as well. It's definitely something that needs to be a high priority, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we address that issue moving forward. But obviously there are many other priorities, and many of them will not be carried out necessarily by Benton County. There are priorities that are noted for consumers' power, for instance. So Does this plan also open up the possibility of funding going to partners such as Consumers Power?
Does, since Consumer Powers is considered a public entity, they're actually eligible for that same mitigation grant program. They still have to apply through us, but they are an eligible subrecipient entity, which is of course why they're included in that. And actually CPI has their own hazard mitigation basically plan or list of projects that they would like to prioritize. Some of those include things like hardening their infrastructure, putting power lines underground, et cetera. And this again opens up that funding opportunity for them as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Just looking through and counting up the number of high priority plans. I mean, high priority items, there are 7, I think, by my count, and then ongoing activities as well. So that's a lot. So I'm looking forward again to seeing how we prioritize among those and start getting some of those actions into play. I would entertain a motion.
I move to adopt the Benton County 2024 Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. And don't go away. The next item is the Oregon Department of Human Services Resilience Hub Grant Opportunity and Comprehensive Recovery Plan. And Brian, again.
So speaking of mitigating and managing some of the climate adaptation impacts, this grant opportunity actually originally came from some of the impacts of the wildfires in 2020, the Labor Day fires. And there was Senate Bill 762 that funded a lot of state agencies, and then additional discussions around how things like COADs or community organization active in disasters and resiliency hubs could be used in all the communities. One of the things that was found, particularly from the Labor Day fires, is that the communities that were impacted kind of spun up these resiliency hubs out of nowhere, usually at fairgrounds, convention centers, expo centers, offices, wherever they could. And this opportunity sort of opened the door and for additional discussion on what would a community resilience hub look like and what would it need. And this would be really, is what it sounds like, is to increase community resilience. And while that is very much a buzzword, what it really means is to support the community in times of need. And that could be by utilizing a shelter, warming cooling centers, kind of a respite relief area, a clean air center, or a general resource center. So to share and communicate resources or information to the community who are impacted. So there's kind of a multi-use. This grant opportunity is being passed through from some state funding from the short session. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, from a previous session. That was, I believe, a House bill. And it gave about $10 million to the entire state. And then it's going to be administered through the Oregon Department of Human Services and their emergency management group. So this opportunity is available to pretty much everybody, even down to the individual household. So it's a very wide open and kind of unique grant in that regard, but it provides generators, backup power, sheltering supplies, planning, training, all kinds of opportunities. So for us here for Benton County, what our area of interest is right now primarily is with developing a comprehensive recovery plan. So looking at the ice storm impacts and thinking about one of our, I'll say, gaps really in our planning efforts is recovery. We know recovery is one of the bigger areas that we can really recoup a lot of our costs, as well as rebuild really truly stronger than we had before and develop that true piece of resilience. But to do that, we need to have some sort of plan and process in place to make sure that is done in a organized fashion. Oftentimes what happens for us in emergency management is we have our response piece. As soon as recovery rolls around, we throw the paperwork in a box and we go to the next thing. And while that's kind of the nature of the beast, we really need to take a little more comprehensive and steady approach to the recovery process. So that's our goal, is to put in for a recovery plan. I know there are some other partners in our jurisdiction that are going to be putting in for some other grant opportunities as well with this, including sheltering supplies.
So has there been any coordination among the different people that will be submitting proposals to this opportunity across the county?
I'll say very minimal. They didn't have that stipulation that there even need to be a discussion. So actually April had a kind of an email thread going about it, and there was some dialogue back and forth about what folks were interested in. But overall, everyone sort of had a different goal and direction. And because it's open to literally anybody, including down, like I mentioned, to the individual homeowner, it was sort of a wide open grant application, which could be a pro or a con in the end. And then this grant opportunity is particularly related to the recovery plan, ties directly to our future discussion about the EPA grant and community resilience
Yes.
hubs as well. And this plan would theoretically outline exactly how those recovery centers would actually, or I'm sorry, the resiliency hubs would actually be used in those rural communities. We have a clean concept with our community partners, but this would be discussed in a larger countywide incident versus a more localized community impact.
Mhm. That sounds like a great pairing of the two funding opportunities. I don't envy whoever the deciders are for this grant competition because it sounds like they really are going to be looking at apples, oranges, and chainsaws.
They definitely are.
Okay, is there any further discussion about this grant opportunity?
Yes. So it's for, the request is for $100,000.
Correct.
And then it says that it'll be for a contracted provider.
Yes, the plan would be to have a contractor come in and help facilitate the discussion, and actually do some of the hard writing. And one of the stipulations that will come out of this, if we are awarded the grant, is to have the contract not only meet with us and our community partners and pull together a team, but really have some sort of deliverable. We need some sort of protocols and checklists and guides to help us in the process, and not just a long, as we talked about, shelf art plan. We need something that we can use and remember to do, following a major emergency.
Do you have any idea what the process might be? Is there going to be public engagement or more of like a sort of internal focus or?
For the recovery plan itself, there'll definitely be an internal focus, obviously within local government, but really it will need to expand. It has to expand with the recovery model, and looking at the recovery support functions, it will have to expand to our community partners.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the notice of intent to apply for the Oregon Department of Human Services Resilience Hub grant opportunity.
Second.
All in favor, please signify with an aye.
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 Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now you can go.
Okay, next item is our, well, first of all, I'm going to check in with everyone. Is anyone in need of a break? Okay. The next item is our Sustainable Materials Management Planning Task Force. And I'm inviting Darren Nichols and Steve Chase up to the front table, and Bailey Payne.
Thank you. Good morning. Nice to see you all. I'm going to take a quick minute to just kind of recap where we've been and where we are, which you all know, and then turn it over to Steve to tell you a little bit about where we're headed with the Sustainable Materials Management Plan, which we sometimes refer to as the SMMP. And if we fall into that habit, you can please call us on that so we don't confuse everybody. This really starts back in, well, a couple of years ago with the Benton County Talks Trash effort. And you board members remember very well, I'm sure, that one of the key recommendations from the community work group coming out of Benton County Talks Trash is that Benton County develop a long-range sustainable materials management plan. And so back in September of last year, we presented to you the work of an ad hoc committee, a citizen committee, community committee, an RFP, a request for proposal, to secure help from outside consultants to help us develop that kind of a plan. And so the board approved that, the release of that request for proposal to solicit consultants in September of 2023, and then through late 2023 and early this year, an internal evaluation committee and the task force chair evaluated 4 responses to that request. We selected a top scoring proposal, presented that to the board, and you all authorized us to begin the final kind of development of a scope and a contract with them. So we have a a nearly final scope. We've been asked to take one more look through that, but I believe we have a final scope of work. And I also believe that our consultant team may be joining us online at some point if they're not already on. Give you a chance to introduce. Okay, we can't see you, our RS team, but at some point, calling you to introduce yourselves and say hello to the board. I think it'd be really nice to meet the parts of the team.
That would be great.
Okay, so before we do that introduction, just wanted to confirm that we have a final scope of work, or like I said, a very close to final scope of work. And we've presented 3 things to you today, partly as an update, but also to really get the board's endorsement of a couple of things. So you have a memo that outlines what we're asking you to do. You also have a draft prospectus for a sustainable materials management plan for Western Oregon. I refer to this as a draft in part because it really is a work in progress with lots of input from the members who are listed on the 3rd item that you have in front of you, which is a roster. And we call this an initial roster because this is a long and growing list of organizations and individuals who are interested in helping with or supporting the work to develop a sustainable materials management plan. And so you can see from the list there's a pretty broad group of constituents from across at least Western Oregon. And that group, that list is growing in terms of interest and also members. So I'll just pause there. I guess I should finish by saying we're asking the board to do 4 things this morning. We're asking you to accept the current draft roster and also please continue to put forward names. We continue to reach out to additional potential members, roster members, and continue to build that participation. We're asking you, secondly, to authorize the chair and staff to schedule a kickoff meeting in mid-May. We have a hold the date out there, but would like you to give the board a chance to give us direction to get started. We're also, related to that, asking the board to direct the task force to develop and present back to you a first draft charter consistent with your direction in the 2023 request for proposals, other recommendations in the Benton County Talks Trash Work Group, and then relating to the work of the task force to develop a sustainable materials management plan. Last but not least, we're asking the board to appoint a board liaison to the task force. I think it's important that you have a voice in that process as well, and someone that can help facilitate two-way dialogue between the work of the task force and your work here at Benton County. And then, of course, any additional guidance as needed to support this important work.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning. I'm Steve Chase, Task Force Chair. I want to step back before we step forward. Quite a bit of activity occurred in the early part of the 1990s that led us to the very comfortable, very successful curbside recycling programs that we're all very familiar with. However, it's an incomplete system in the sense that we had spotty advancement of the marketability of all the raw materials that are collected within that system. This is an opportunity to finish what began a long, long time ago, and that is to take a look at waste no longer as a discard, but as a raw material. That's the bottom line of everything here. How to get there? We've chosen a very typical classic change management process that involves, first of all, a thought process. Second of all, out of that thought process, solution making. Third of all, endorsement of those solutions, not only political endorsement, but community-based endorsement. Fourth of all, to have legislative activity that creates an entity that will forevermore sustain this set of solutions, and equally important, will sustain a table, if you will, that allows the thought process to occur. Fifth of all, of course, comes the programs that will come from this. Now, the state does a very good job in terms of a very, very good job, I might add, in terms of packaging and labeling. But the state is looking to local government and local community groups and local businesses, private sector, to deal with not only the collection, but to deal with the transportation and ultimately the end use of these. Of course, we want to cycle that end use product back into the system. That'd be ideal. We also recognize that will also be imperfect. There will be a need for a resting place for those materials. Slowing down the advancement of those materials to be discarded within our landfills or within the valleys and river systems of Indonesia is a huge thing. All of us have seen it on 60 Minutes and other programs that have been out there for the last 25 years. Instead of talking about it, we're looking at solutions now, the doing it side of completing that cycle. That's the first thing. The second thing is a regional context. When I was introduced to you some 4 months ago, I saw this as a Benton County thing. It is very clear in all of the communications we've had with other counties, with small businesses, with large businesses, with Metro over in Portland, with state government, with small recyclers, with the Association of Oregon Recyclers. This is a regional thing. It's not just a Benton County thing. And it deals with not only a desire to create an economy for these discards as a raw material, but also deals with the reality of capacity. How much capacity do we have and how much price control do we have for the end stage of all these materials that are out there? Our capacity is dwindling. We had meetings just yesterday with 4 different entities, and one of them struck me in particular. It happened to be Lincoln County. Not trying to pick on Lincoln County here, but it's the reality that they're looking at. They don't have a landfill. They're never going to have a landfill. They're looking at a landfill to be created somewhere else. They're looking at how economically they can sustain transfer stations, source separation entities, et cetera, how they can get their discards into a marketplace without affecting the price, the rate that people are paying in Lincoln County in that wet environment. The inverse of that is if they don't have price control and they're faced with sticker shock, they're going to have a problem in terms of discards ending up within their natural rivers, valleys, streams, et cetera. Only using them as an example, but it's a very real issue for them. You could say the same thing, different set of circumstances for Marion County. The same thing with Lane, same thing with Polk. That's dependent upon Marion County to find the solutions for them, et cetera, et cetera. So you see the regional nature of this issue. What we don't have is a table, though, for the regional discussions to occur. So this affords that opportunity for the table to be created, for people to gather, come together, bring about, as I said, the change management process. Last thing I'm going to leave you with is what are the deliverables? I think that's the most important thing. You're investing good public monies into us proceeding going forward with this. You want a good return on investment. Here's the deliverables as I see it. First of all, we're going to deliver a roadmap that deals with facilities. And by facilities, we're not just talking about landfills. We're talking about material recovery facilities. We're talking about transfer stations. An example is a transfer station in Oregon City. It needs to be moved. A whole world grew up around it, and it needs to be moved, and it's undersized. I just use it as an example. We want to know what the roadmap is for all of Western Oregon in terms of who is doing what. There's a legal phrase both in federal as well as a variety of state governments. What's existing, what's planned, meaning thought of, and what's proposed, where there's actually land use applications, franchise agreements around it, et cetera. So a roadmap of facilities. You want it, we want it. I think you're going to want it for any land use decision that you have off into the future. The second is you're going to want to have a clearinghouse of scientific and technical advancements that are going on. That clearinghouse includes particularly the work at Oregon State University. Yes, we are meeting with Oregon State University, and with the chair's encouragement, we're not only interested in having participation of relevant faculty, but also of students. Students have a lot to share with us in terms of thinking of their future. We're also looking at a information base or clearinghouse of public policy options and opportunities out there. What is it that other communities have done in terms of public policy and ultimately rulemaking that would be advantageous for Oregon, and particularly Western Oregon, in our set of circumstances? We're also looking at a proposal to legislatively establish a permanent organizational entity to carry on this work. Benton County, in my eyes, is a convener, but it's the region really that has responsibility for this work. And a legislative proposal to create an organizational entity is within earshot and something that we would like to see come out of all of this work. Ultimately, we want to qualify Western Oregon and all of this for funding and a variety of grant sources that are out there. Of course, the Resiliency Act funding that's being touted for a number of different programs. When I draw a bottom line to all of the efforts that we're going to be engaged in and how Benton County has positioned itself as a convener, I really look back to the work that a number of us across the nation were engaged in 1990. Where I started this conversation was we need to close that loop. We need to, again, get back to the point of looking at our discards as a marketable raw material. This is a giant leap towards accomplishing that objective. And I think it's a leap that is about time. So with that, I'm going to toss this back over to Darren. And thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for laying out kind of where we're headed. It's really exciting to have the conversations that Steve described with so many colleagues across Western Oregon that are applauding the leadership of this Board of Commissioners and very much endorsing. I had a similar conversation yesterday with one of our staff colleagues at Lane County, who was talking a little bit about their efforts to develop a solid waste management plan a couple of years ago. He said, Darren, to be honest, the work that you're proposing at Benton County is work that we really should have done. And we're very much excited about joining this effort in order to set the regional context and actually begin to make the changes across the waste shed that we really need to make. So thank you. I want to give Bailey a chance to introduce our consulting team colleagues who are on, so you get a chance to put some names with faces, and then maybe ask RRS to talk a little bit about kind of the work they're doing and prepared to do for us.
Good morning, and thank you, commissioners. Real excited to be able to introduce RRS. They're a consultant that has a lot of experience, office in Oregon, and is very knowledgeable about the landscape here in Oregon. So with that, I'm not sure if we're going to have them on screen or not. We have Joel and Lizzie Paul, and Joel Schoening. There we are. These are two of our consultants, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thanks. Thanks to the council and the board, the commission and the board, and to Steve and Darren and Bailey. I'm Joel Schoening. I'm a consultant for RRS. I've been working generally in the area of Oregon's policy landscape for about 15 years, specifically on a lot of multi-jurisdictional and statewide projects and programs that in one way or another advance sustainability, equity, and economic development. These kinds of multi-jurisdictional projects are a favorite of mine. So I was really happy that our team at RRS was selected for this work. We are super excited about this project. This is exactly the kind of thing that that we like to do. We're a mission-driven organization. We have deep roots in municipal and public sector sustainable materials management, and over the last nearly 40 years have expanded that to a full suite of sustainability consulting that includes extended producer responsibility and policy, and as well as engineering and technical aspects of materials management, and really connecting the dots around the loop is one way that I like to think about it, and making sure that markets are ready for materials, that municipalities and jurisdictions are there to support collections, and processors are preparing materials for those end markets, and connecting those dots all the way through the value chain. In my experience with these kinds of projects, to sort of pile on to some of the comments that have already been mentioned, what the commission is doing is commendable. This kind of community engagement and regional thinking and regional perspective doesn't happen perhaps as often as is needed. So I applaud the commissioners for taking that leadership role. And before I hand it off to Lizzie to introduce herself, I just want to give a shout out to Bailey and Darren and Steve, who've been already great partners and bringing us into this. And I'm really looking forward to getting started. Lizzie, introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Joel. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Lizzie Paul. I am a consultant with Resource Recycling Systems, RRS, and I'm located in Tacoma, Washington. A lot of my background comes from the public sector, solid waste management systems, pretty strong focus on some of the traditional solid waste systems. So it's really exciting, like Joel said, to see Benton County take this step forward and be open to some innovative solutions for sustainable materials management in the region. So I am excited to get to work on this, and thank you all again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lizzie and Joel. Appreciate you joining us this morning, and thanks for your kind of being flexible with us. I know we're asking you to do things that are a little bit outside the traditional solid waste scope of work, but RRS has already been a very good partner and has added some value to the conversation, which we appreciate. So we're looking ahead to the middle of May for a kickoff, and that agenda is not totally set yet, but this is how we're envisioning spending the day. We'd gather the folks that you see on this roster, as well as anyone else who decides to join between now and then. I think there's a few names still waiting to put in these boxes, but basically gather together the region in Salem, because Salem is centrally located, and it's also a little easier for some of our state partners to join us there. But we have reservations at a venue that's big enough to handle a pretty large group of folks. Would like to invite a handful of county commissioners who have really stepped forward, including this board, but to put forward some speakers to welcome folks to the project, talk a little bit from your perspective about why it's so important and why it's timely, and also why a regional approach is really the most effective approach. Following that, we'd like to invite a few of our state level partners. So we're thinking members of the legislature, possibly the governor's office, to talk a little bit about some of the work that's already underway at the state level in Oregon that's very complementary to these local kind of regional collaborative efforts. Similarly, then would like to invite colleagues from DEQ and from RRS to talk about the technical work that's underway through the Recycling Modernization Act, and then of course this pending Sustainable Materials Management Plan. Use that as a way of kind of grounding all of us for the work that's coming. And then in the room there, basically make a collective commitment to work together and to dedicate some committed staff to work on a smaller working group that will be sort of the day-to-day team that works directly with RRS and with Benton County and other staff to develop the solutions, develop the roadmap that Steve describes, and really be kind of the direct support to the task force. At this point, roughly, we're envisioning that the working group would meet more or less monthly as it completes its work. The task force would meet more or less quarterly to review the work that's been done so far, provide additional guidance and support, but in that kind of time frame. And that as we approach September, October, November, We'd be working directly with the governor's office, DEQ, and key legislative leaders to evaluate whether and when and how to put forward possibly a vehicle that would be a legislative vehicle to support this effort in the short term, but also importantly in the longer term. So without knowing what any of that looks like quite yet, at a high level, that's what we're looking at. The schedule is the key dates are laid out in your packet. If you look at the second page of the prospectus, you'll see we anticipated that in March we would select consultants. In April, we would identify a working group, and that we would refine the scope of work. Then in May and through the summer, we'd have the kickoff meeting and actually do the substantive technical work and look at options for going forward. And then in October, we'd begin to draft some recommendations in advance of the legislative session. So we're still on that time frame, and that's, you know, at a high level, that is what we're thinking. So at this point, please ask questions. And
I would just say that that is, of course, a very rapid timeline. And I think that depending on how the work itself is sliced and diced, that's doable. In some discussions earlier, we talked about this being more than just a 1-year process, but potentially being more like a 2-year process. Is that still something that you're discussing, or would that be something that the working group and the task force would decide?
Yeah, thank you. I think you're right. This is ambitious. On the other hand, there is a lot of momentum. And while it feels like this is a kickoff, it's actually sort of a kickoff based on a couple of years of groundwork. So it's not like we're starting from scratch. We have a lot of momentum. We also think it's important to hit this long session with at least a concept that pairs up well with the Recycling Modernization Act and begins to kind of, as Steve says, at least build the box. And then in the short session for 2026, we would look at the contents potentially to put in that box. So we're thinking about this being a 2 to 3 year project with deliverables along the way in sort of a stepwise fashion. As we learn, it will tell us more about what the options are. As we explore those options, that'll tell us a little bit more about where priorities are and what could be investable or feasible. And we'll use that kind of iterative process throughout to develop a plan.
I know that there is precedent for Benton County playing this kind of a leadership role because of the Shemeketa working group or planning group that was active, what was it, in the 90s? No.
In the 70s.
70s. So, wow. That is a long time ago. But so there is precedent, and that was Marion Polk, Yamhill, Benton, Lynn, or something like that. So it was not quite as broad as what we're looking at, but it was a robust effort nonetheless. But that was funded by a large EPA grant from my minimal knowledge. Are there resources like that that will be able to help to fund this effort, especially if we're looking at sustaining something for a 2 or 3 year period?
Yes, thank you. We're looking at the Benton County Board of Commissioners investment as an initial kind of leverage for other investors to join. We've had that conversation now with a few of our county partners, and there is some support for additional county level investment. We'd like to create that kind of collective commitment as a leverage that entices the state to invest in this effort. I'm really glad you mentioned the Shemeketa plan, because as we've had these conversations, several folks have said, wow, this is like getting back to the Shemeketa plan, which I think at that point in time was really groundbreaking. People still remember the effort that Benton County put in to lead that kind of a conversation. We view this very much as that same kind of leadership opportunity where we use our investment to leverage additional investment, both local, state, possibly federal, and private sector as well. I think it's important that everyone invest in long-term solutions.
Are there questions from my fellow commissioners?
Well, I was also going to ask about the timeline, or more just share my comments. It is a pretty tight turnaround. But I know that the limiting factor there is the legislature. So by all means, I'm not saying we can't do it. I just always like to be conservative and budget extra resources, time mainly. So I just wanted to flag that, and we'll see how it goes. But other than that, thank you for all the work that you guys have done on this. I'm really excited. And my hope is that this really goes somewhere and that we are successful, and it's not just something that we tried and set on a shelf. So, and I believe that's everybody's intention. So.
Well, you answered one of my questions. I mean, this is a exciting roster, and then, well, how do you function as a group? And so you have a smaller working group, but just the scope is exciting. I mean, I think it snowballed. Figure out who's interested, who should be involved. I know I contributed a name or two here, and so did quite a few other people. So it is exciting, just showing our neighbors are waking up, and oh yeah, this is a regional question effort. I probably should be involved, and so I assume if people are listed here, they have expressed interest and are willing to put some time in. So that's I can usually estimate how many names, but it's a great list. And I like the idea of kicking this off in Salem, and to show it's not just a Benton County project, that it has a wide scope. And again, appreciate the clarification on the timetable. You want to get ready for the long session that starts in January, and you need to have conversations in at least by October to get in line. So I think get something rolling in the 25 session, and probably have to finish or adjust in the short session in early 2026. So I'm excited. It seems like the Talking Trash work group finished a year ago. Is that when we were kind of wrapping things up? And then, well, the next phase is coming, and the next phase is coming, and here it is. So I'm excited about RRS, getting some people that have more experience than we have in-house. And I think that's going to increase the chances of us being successful.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Malone. I just wanted to confirm that we've spoken personally to everyone on the list and asked them if they'd be willing to commit time. And I think the fact that we're taking time to reach out personally and build those relationships, it's a little bit slower on the front end, but it's definitely giving folks a chance to understand the project and then make the commitment that's right for them. And I think that's the part that we find really exciting, is the level of support. When people find out what Benton County has been doing, and that we're honestly committed to solving materials challenges on a regional basis, it generates a level of excitement that keeps us going from day to day. So thank you.
I do have another question and a request. I think I saw the first sort of kickoff meeting is scheduled, you said, in Salem.
Yes.
And then what are the expectations for the meeting location moving forward for the task force?
The working group is going to meet here in Benton County. I think it's important. The task force will probably continue to meet in Salem, given its regional implications.
So let me just, so the task force in Salem, the working group in Benton County, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Did you want to say anything else or?
No.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off. And then, so I have one request, which is when it comes to the draft charter, that the Board of Commissioners can have as much time as possible to review that. And I would request that we have at least 2 meetings for that, just in case, at the first meeting that it's presented to us, if we have changes, that would give us time to have the changes be made, put them in the packet for the next meeting, and then the public would have a chance to see that as well. So.
Thank you. I think that's fair and doable. The charter probably won't look too much different than what you've seen, but I think it is important to give you a chance to make it what it needs to be.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that the next items are really ours to discuss and determine. I think that it sounds like we're all excited about the current draft roster of task force members and about the mid-May kickoff in Salem. And we've just touched upon the charter and having ample time to review that first draft charter prior to board approval. So the next item on our list today is to appoint a board liaison to the task force and provide any additional guidance as needed moving forward. So the liaison role, as I understand it, would be involved primarily with the task force, but not with the working group per se. Although I suppose it would be up to the commissioner playing that role, whether the degree of involvement and engagement that they wanted to have. So just as a short timer, I know I would love to be involved in this and to pick it up, but I think that it's probably more appropriate for one of my fellow commissioners to pick up this role, given that I'm only going to be around through December.
I personally would be happy to do it, but I also like to hear from Commissioner Malone. And then whoever does it, I think it would be good to have clarity either from staff or from the board what that exact role is, so that whoever the liaison isn't, overstepping or having miscommunications.
I'm also interested in more meetings. The legislative aspect gets my attention. I think that I've kind of worked with the legislature for a couple decades and have some notion how it works, so that I think I could be of some use there. But do we want to defer this and have a little further discussion?
Yes, and I do want to say that although I have said I'm not interested, I am passionately interested, and I would love to be at the kickoff, even though I will not be able to sustain that level of engagement.
Yeah, thank you. I think we haven't really said what we think the liaison role could or should or might be. I think it's important for every organization to find that out for itself. You each bring very important skills and backgrounds. It's possible that the liaison role or roles could be shared among the board. Just want to be careful of your time, not to presume. And then also, we don't create a public meeting situation, but really, I mean, your leadership has been outstanding to date. And if we could tap into all of that, I mean, that would be the best of all worlds.
So just thinking ahead, when it gets to the point of going to the legislature, would there be room or roles for the entire Board of Commissioners to interact and support at the state level?
More effective if that's the case.
So Commissioner Malone, are you most interested in the legislative part or just all of it?
All of it. I've been following this effort for a while. There was a mention of in trying to recover materials, not making the process expensive or onerous, that people don't take materials to the transfer station or to the landfill. I know just before I got on the board, Republic had a proposal to triple the fees for self-haulers, meaning the pickup load of material. And rural landowners have been dealing with illegal dumping for decades, and I think we're most of the time making progress on that, but definitely have to keep that in mind, that if it's too hard, too far, too expensive, then the illegal dumping goes up, and that definitely is not acceptable or anything we want to even inadvertently encourage. So I'm interested in the whole project and am excited about it, and glad we're ready to kick off phase 2, or if that's the right number. And I would like to be involved.
If I may, I see 3 roles for the liaison. These roles pertain not only to you, but to Board of Commissioners of Western Oregon. Role number 1, public policy guidance. We really need to have a sounding board behind the scenes. You know it much better than we do, even though we're all involved in it. Number 2, dispute resolution. Yes, there will be disputes, but the disputes will be handled in a very professional manner. But the resolution of it does benefit from interpersonal contacts, et cetera. It's an invaluable role that the liaison would play. Number 3, you have an expectation of me to do good, tight meeting management, not to dominate all the policy discussions or the direction where things go. The good, tight meeting management. But it would benefit me to have a sounding board, an advisory role for whomever the liaison is that your board chooses.
If you were not prepared to make this decision today and at this time, we could defer it, but if, or go, please flip a coin. I agree that it's a multi-part role, and it's one of, sounds like liaison, but also to some degree, board political advising of the task force leadership as it moves forward, just in order to make sure that we're hitting the right notes and advancing the overall agenda.
So if we want to talk this out a little bit, I mean, we have a couple different options, possibly. One, I mean, if we vote right now, then Commissioner Ogier, you would have to be the tiebreaker, it sounds like. I'm not sure you necessarily want to do that. We could have further conversations and figure out multiple roles. I'm not sure if would be the best way, but maybe that's an option. I'm open to other options as well.
Yeah, I think it really is what feels right for Benton County. And you all have played critical, important roles to date. I don't see that changing. One thing I think we need to talk about with the charter is what kind of communication do you want from Steve and the task force back to the full board? What kind of communication do you want from staff and the consulting team? We need to get into that cadence so that we're not overwhelming you, but making sure that you're up to speed and the public is up to speed on the project. Certainly can give this a little bit more thought. I would welcome the county administrator input from Rachel and and to give you a chance to think this through a little bit. It's going to be important. I also think it's important that we don't try to get it carved in stone right now. We have 2 or 3 years to figure this out. We're going to need to be flexible along the way. We've been flexible. I think, frankly, our willingness to be open to change is what's enabled us to move forward with so many partners and build the kind of project that we have in front of us. So
I want to throw out another option. As I've said, I am a short timer, but I could also pick up the role through December. And then when you have a new commissioner on board, the 3 of you can hash it out together and determine who best would be able to fulfill that role moving forward.
That sounds even more complicated.
I think we should just bring this up at a goal setting meeting and then we can kind of have a more fruitful conversation.
Okay, I can do that.
My recommendation.
Commissioner Malone, does that sound good to you?
Yes, that's what I suggested early on.
Great minds think alike.
Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion with respect to the remaining 4 items on the decision docket.
I move to accept the prospectus as a general framework for the task force to develop a sustainable materials management plan, to accept the current draft roster of task force members, to authorize the task force chair and county staff to hold a task force kickoff meeting in mid-May 2024, and to direct the task force to develop and present to the board a first draft charter consistent with the board's direction in the 2023 request for proposals and recommendations in the Benton County Talks Trash final work group report relating to the development of a sustainable materials management plan.
Second.
All in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay.
thank you, Joel and Lizzie.
Thank you, Joel and Lizzie.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Is there any, as you will note before I move on, we did move the announcement section to the end of the agenda. And I think that maybe we need to shift it so that it's before other rather than after other. But when we can always play that by ear. But we chose to move it partly because sometimes the topic of announcements or the themes that we would think of that we want to share come up during the meeting and not necessarily prior to the meeting. So we figured that that might be another way to make sure that we capture those. Is there any other business before the board before we recess and go into executive session? Okay, then with that, I would like to announce that we will be entering into executive session under ORS 192.6602D for labor negotiations and ask those that are not involved in that to leave the room at this time, including those of you online. Is it, Tracy, do you have anything that you want to share visually? Thank you.